Silence hangs over the graveyard as Ben, Gwen, and Kevin all stare up at Gwendolyn as if expecting her to correct herself, for surely she misspoke, saying that Ben would ever kill Kevin. However, on the contrary, she elaborates, explaining, albeit in vague terms, how during a battle for the fate of the whole universe against an evil Osmosian, Kevin absorbed the power of Ben's watch to give himself the strength he needed to defeat the bad guy and save all their lives. But in return, he lost his mind and became an even bigger threat, unable to tell friend from foe and terrorizing them all until eventually Ben had to step in and put him down. Heatedly, Ben claims that this must be a mistake, since he'd never kill Kevin, turning to his best friend and urging him to believe him, though in a chilly voice, Kevin asks Ben who he's trying to convince, him or himself. Unfortunately, before Ben can say anything to convince the other boy of his sincerity, a vehicle they all know well touches down in front of them, the Rust Bucket, now tricked out to fly. Stepping from inside the RV is a bearded Grandpa Max, who calls to Gwendolyn, telling her Ben needs her abilities, though when his eyes fall on the kids, and especially Kevin, he is left speechless, making a beeline and wrapping them all in a hug. Smiling, Ben and Gwen say they're glad to see their grandpa too, though Kevin says nothing, evidently still processing his feelings. Ending the hug, Max then tells them all to hurry along, since Ben's waiting, though with a slight frown, Gwen states that it's pretty rude of Ben 10,000 to request her future counterpart's abilities rather than her help, adding that it seems like his big head's only gotten bigger the older he's gotten. However, it is Gwendolyn of all people who defends her cousin, placing a hand on Gwen's shoulder as she tells her not to take it personally. Her Ben just has a hard time asking for help, since he feels like he has to carry the weight of the world alone. Her eyes then fall on Kevin's grave once more as she steps into the RV, with future Max and the three kids following suit. Taking off into the sky, the Rust Bucket begins flying towards Ben 10,000's headquarters, while inside, Ben and Gwen are amazed at all the future tech on display. Eagerly, Ben calls for Kevin to check out some of it with him, knowing how much his buddy loves this kind of thing, though in a flat voice, Kevin says he's good, choosing instead to just stare out the window. A few minutes later, they touch down on a private landing pad near the top of a tower modeled after the Omnitrix, and while Ben, Gwen, Kevin, and Gwendolyn all hop out, Max stays behind. Curiously, Ben asks why his grandpa isn't coming, though in a tone of melancholy, the old man replies that the boy's future self stopped needing his help a long time ago. Stepping into the tower's command center, the group of four are met by a scowling Ben still in his accelerate form, whose mood has evidently only grown worse since their last encounter, as he furiously demands to know why Gwendolyn hasn't sent the kids home yet, stating that if one of them were to die, it would have catastrophic consequences for the timeline. Feistily, Gwendolyn retorts that she hasn't had time, and besides, if they've got a situation on their hands, maybe the kids can help. Knuckles proverbially whitening as he grips the table between them, Ben 10,000 hisses that he'd have thought she'd remember what happened last time they believed Kevin would help them, his tone a mix of burning anger and something softer that carries a lot of pain. Feeling fed up with this sort of treatment, Kevin snaps at the man to stop talking about him like he's not here, and though this does make Ben 10,000 growl with frustration, he sticks to his strategy of ignoring the boy, instead telling Gwendolyn they have work to do, as he briefs her on the situation. As it turns out, Animo is on the loose, and to make matters worse, he's stolen Vilgax's body, meaning he needs her to track the doctor down right away, before he can conduct whatever sinister experiment he might have in mind for the Chimeran's corpse. However, before Gwendolyn can use any magic to track the mad scientist down, the tower's security system does the job for her, with a computer terminal flashing and beeping to indicate there has been a breach in Sector 1A Centric, right where the null void chamber is located. Sharing looks of horror, Ben 10,000 and Gwendolyn both spring into action, with Ben zipping off his accelerate, while Gwendolyn readies a teleportation spell for them all. Thanks to this, the two teams arrive at the scene of the breach at the same time, with Gwendolyn and the kids witnessing Vilgax's seeming return from the dead, now with additional modifications. Rushing ahead as per usual, Ben 10,000 wastes no time in transforming into Diamond Head to juke it out with the Chimeran Tyrant, though it seems Vilgax's new tricks are more than a match for the hero of heroes, causing the younger Ben to declare that he'll help his future self, while the Gwens handle Animo. This just leaves Kevin on his own, and though at first his dislike of Ben 10K's treatment inclines him towards helping in the Animo fight, when it becomes clear the pair of Gwens can more than handle themselves, thanks to Gwen's lucky girl powers and Gwendolyn's magic, he decides to back up the Bens instead. And it is good that he does, as when he arrives outside, Vilgax is summarily trouncing the two Tennysons, using fleshy tethers and bioorganic grenades to overcome anything that is thrown at him, while gloating that Animo has given him knowledge of all of Ben's aliens and tactics, meaning nothing he can do can stop him. Rushing in to join the fight, Kevin asks if the doc's given Vilgax any intel on him, his body now coated in taupe-colored future metal, as he swings a fist into the back of Vilgax's leg, dropping him to one knee. This provides Kid Ben with just the opening he needs to uppercut Vilgax's chin as forearms, though before Ben 10,000 can likewise capitalize, the alien warlord lets out a guttural growl as he grabs Kevin by the torso and tosses him off the platform and into the seemingly bottomless abyss. However, before Kevin can meet a rather sticky end, he feels a pair of hands grab him, Looking up at his savior, he sees a red alien who vaguely resembles a manta ray, and knowing that this is not in his Ben's arsenal, quickly realizes this must be Ben 10,000. Touching down, the ray alien places Kevin back on his feet, though before either can say a word, they are joined by Vilgax and the younger Ben, who had evidently tackled Vilgax off the platform in a fit of rage for what he'd done to Kevin. Amazed that Ben could do this alone, Ben 10,000 asks how he managed to get one over on Vilgax, though in a gruff rebuke, the younger version states that he followed Kevin's lead and hit him in the leg again first, adding that it's good to have people who can help. Taking this as his cue, Kevin springs into action just as Vilgax gets back to his feet, using his status as an unknown variable to create openings for Ben to capitalize on, with the two boys driving Vilgax back towards a waterway. Then, when the tyrant is in position, they swing a double haymaker, knocking him into the water, where Ben 10,000 can freeze him with an unfamiliar Arctic alien. It is only when this is done that the adult Ben reverts to his human form, an embarrassed grimace on his face, as he admits that perhaps he did forget one or two important lessons along the way. By the time the two Bens and Kevin have returned to the Null Void chamber, the Gwens along with Grandpa Max have already subdued Animo and shut down the projector. To celebrate this, they all return to the penthouse, with adult Ben even delegating some of his responsibilities to the Galactic Enforcer so he can spend this time with his family. At last, all seems well. Well, almost, as Kevin is still quiet, with Gwendolyn noticing this and approaching him to ask what's wrong. Truthfully, Kevin admits that he's still working through the whole being dead thing, but more than that, he's confused as to why Ben 10K saved him when he seemed to hate him. Chuckling fondly, Gwendolyn replies that Ben never hated Kevin, he loved him like a brother, and losing him is what made him take on all this extra responsibility to make sure he never lost anyone ever again. In fact, even his harsh treatment of the kids was his way of trying to protect them, albeit misguidedly. Looking amazed, Kevin asks how she got to be so smart. Though still chuckling, Gwendolyn retorts that she was always smart, though having racked up a few doctorates, including one in psychology, hasn't hurt. Just don't tell her younger self. She wants her to find this all out on her own. Finally, the party comes to a close, with Gwendolyn preparing to take the kids home, though before they can, Ben 10,000 has one last gift, handing Ben a storage cube containing a birthday cake, since he remembers they forgot to grab one and always regretted it. Following this, things play out as normal for a while, more or less, though Ben notices that Kevin has become more subdued, and though he can't prove it, he begins to suspect that his best friend's avoiding him. A few days later, Team Tennyson arrive in Salem, Massachusetts, and while at first it appears this will be a snooze fest, things start heating up when Charmcaster returns, hell-bent on wreaking havoc. Naturally, the heroes go to confront her, with Ben soon finding himself the target of a spell, as Charmcaster creates a bubble around herself and another around him. Thankfully, Gwen is there to save her cousin, shoving him out of the way just as the two bubbles collide, resulting in an explosion that throws both Gwen and Charmcaster back. Landing hard, Gwen struggles to get to her feet, but to her shock, when she sees herself in a piece of broken window, it is Charmcaster's reflection staring back at her. Looking around, the worst is confirmed a moment later, when she sees her own body in the distance, no doubt being piloted by the malicious witch. Unfortunately, before Gwen can do anything, she is swarmed by police and hauled away, leaving Charmcaster, now posing as Gwen, to perpetrate her ruse unopposed. Rushing to her side, Max, Ben, and Kevin ask if quote-unquote Gwen is alright, with Charmcaster feigning dizziness, but otherwise putting on a brave face. This act manages to fool both Max and Ben, though Kevin can't help but be suspicious, keeping a close eye on the girl for the rest of the morning as she shows an abnormal amount of interest in the Omnitrix. Not only that, but she also seems emotionally volatile, vacillating between violent outbursts of rage and sickly sweetness, neither of which like the Gwen he knows. Wanting to see if the others have noticed anything strange, he pulls Max and Ben aside while at a market the imposter had insisted they visit, with him confiding his theory that somehow Charmcaster has messed with Gwen's mind. Shrugging, Ben claims that she seems like just as much of a dweeb as ever, while Max at least takes this a bit more seriously, admitting that it's possible, though they'll need to figure out what exactly Charmcaster did to Gwen in order to fix it. Scowling, Kevin growls that he doesn't like just waiting for something to happen, though laying a comforting hand on his shoulder, Max promises they won't let anything happen to Gwen, a knowing look in his eyes. Finally, Charmcaster is able to collect all her ingredients, brewing them in a large cauldron which definitely doesn't look super sus, as they all come together to create a powerful miasmic aroma. Naturally, it is at this moment that the real Gwen arrives in Charmcaster's body and attempts to explain the mix-up. Thanks to Kevin's theory, Ben is a little more receptive to the idea than in canon, with Kevin himself soon confirming that this is Gwen after only a few moments. Curiously, Ben asks how his friend knows, with Kevin admitting that it's in the way Gwen rests her hands when she's not moving. Amazed at this level of observation, the Tennyson cousins ask how Kevin could possibly have recognized such a minute idiosyncrasy, with him mumbling that he just notices things about Gwen, his face suddenly going a little pink through the fog. cog. However, before more can be said on the matter, Gwen's voice pipes up behind them, bitter bile in it as she calls this little scene touching, dropping all pretense. Furiously, Gwen orders Charmcaster to give her body back, though with a sneer, the sorceress retorts that maybe if she's a good little girl and butts out this time, she'll swap Gwen back into her own body once she's got her hands on Ben's. Coldly, the heroes tell Charmcaster there's no chance they'll let her do that, though cackling maliciously, she hisses that she's not giving them a choice. She then begins chanting, as the bubbles from earlier begin forming around herself and Ben, with Gwen rushing in to stop her like in canon, though before anything can happen, Kevin comes up behind Charmcaster and clocks her over the back of the head with his wood-coated hand, knocking her out cold. Angrily, the real Gwen tells Kevin to watch it, since unlike him, she actually uses her head. Though having gotten over his earlier blushing, he snarks back that she can't be using it that much if she thought it was a good idea to run headlong into a dangerous spell. That's some Ben-level thinking right there. In unison, the Tennyson cousins let out an indignant exclamation, though seeing their time is short, Gwen quickly begins flipping through Charmcaster's spellbook, finding the transference spell, and reverting herself and the sorceress back to their original bodies. However, before she does so, she does make one last-minute action, tossing the spellbook to Ben and telling him to hold it, since she wants to keep studying it once she's herself again. Thanks to this, the final battle with Charmcaster is entirely averted, with Gwen reclaiming her body and gaining a useful new resource in the process, while Charmcaster is rightfully taken away for her crimes in Salem. Next up for Team Tennyson is the episode Merry Christmas. Unfortunately, Kevin's presence does not alter this much beyond having an extra ally to fight Mr. Jingle's nutcrackers, and an extra person being turned into an elf. Following this is Benwolf, where things begin to change once again, as while Ben is still smitten with Kai Green, she only has eyes for the rugged and slightly older Kevin Levin. Truthfully, Kevin has no interest in Kai, though he does find it funny to watch Ben try and show off so he can impress her, remembering how Ben had mocked him during their first encounter with Charmcaster in Vegas. Gwen also finds this equally amusing, with the pair bonding over it. That is until the appearance of Purple Lightning and a Yen'll douchey forces them to take the situation seriously. When it comes time to hunt the beast down, Kevin decides to accompany Kai and Gwen, though whether this is to make Gwen feel better in the face of Kai's grandpa's sexist policy, or simply to avoid being alone with Ben is anyone's guess. Nonetheless, the trio do manage to find the cactus they are looking for, squirting its juices onto the silver pendant and returning to the main group. Unfortunately, when they attempt to use the pendant to defeat the beast and save Ben from becoming a monster too, they are unsuccessful, with it being revealed the Yen'll douchey is not a Navajo werewolf, but an alien one. Following this, the events of the episode go like in canon, with the only difference being that due to lacking cannon bolt, Ben fights the werewolf as Gax, beating it up and trapping it inside the collapsing cave. The following morning, as the Tennysons prepare to leave, Kai slips Kevin her phone number, urging him to call her much to Ben's chagrin. Though adopting a mean look, Kevin laughs in her face, saying as if he'd waste his time on a loser like her. Honestly, he's already forgotten her name. Naturally, this deeply wounds Kai. While having not seen his friend act like this in quite a while, Ben demands to know what his problem is. Still keeping the mean facade, Kevin scoffs that he doesn't have to answer to Tennyson, turning on his heels and heading into the RV. Though, when he hears the sound of Ben and Kai chatting in hushed tones, no doubt about what a jerk he is, he can't help but smile a little. While beside him, Gwen rolls her eyes at the immaturity and stupidity of this tactic. In the days that follow, the arid deserts of Arizona are replaced with heavy rains, forcing the gang to resort to mostly indoor activities. Thankfully, Ben has this covered with his copy of Sumo Slammer's SmackDown, though this gets rather lonely to play alone, with him quickly inviting Kevin to be his player too. Figuring they won't have to talk while doing this, Kevin agrees, sitting beside Ben and fighting by his side like old times. However, even combined they cannot get past the first level, with Ben eventually growing frustrated and turning into upgrade to hack the game so they can move on to the next stage. Unfortunately, just as he does this, the purple lightning from the desert strikes the rust bucket, causing both himself and Kevin to vanish. A moment later, the two boys find themselves inside the video game, with Ben sporting armor and a ponytail, while Kevin is dressed like a ninja. At first, Ben is excited, hardly able to believe they're inside a video game. This excitement quickly fades when he realizes they are not alone, and worse, he cannot access any of his aliens. Thankfully, the game has not stripped Kevin of his Osmosian powers, with him quickly coating himself in stone and punching his way through robo-sumos while Ben looks for a weapon. As luck would have it, Ben soon comes across a chest with a sword in it, and not a moment too soon, as when the final enemy falls to Kevin's punches, the boss spawns in, a giant robot that will require them both to beat. Joining forces, Ben and Kevin are able to bring the big behemoth down, though it comes at a cost, as when Kevin lands the finishing blow, the giant robo-sumo's body falls backwards, landing on Ben and crushing him. him. Thanks to having more than one life left, Ben quickly respawns, though all the same he scowls at Kevin, blaming him for killing him. Testily, Kevin retorts that Ben can pay him back in 6 years, the vitriol in his voice followed by a look of shock, suggesting that he had not meant to say it, even though he had been thinking it. Dropping his scowl, Ben asks if this is why Kevin's been avoiding him since they got back from the future, since he's still upset about what Gwendolyn told them, though in a heated voice, Kevin demands to know how Ben would feel in his place. Sighing, the younger boy admits that he wouldn't feel great about dying in a few years either, with Kevin admitting it's more than just the idea of dying that's bothering him. Ben's always been the guy he could count on, but now when he looks at him, that image is tainted by the idea that he's also the guy who's gonna kill him. It's really confusing. Nodding, Ben agrees that it would be, though for what it's worth, he's not planning on killing Kevin, even if he does go nuts, since he knows that no matter what, the two of them can work it out together. He then offers a fist to his best friend, and smiling genuinely for the first time in a while, Kevin bumps his own against Ben's, grinning they sure can, and right now they need to work out a way back to the real world. Spotting what looks like a sumo dojo in the distance, Ben suggests they check it out, with Kevin following close behind him. When they're standing in the center of the dojo, it begins to rise into the air, transporting them to the next level. To make matters better, when they reach the new level, Ben quickly comes across a forearms icon, similar to the one he grabbed when he got his sword, with him quickly leaping onto an adjacent platform and grabbing it. As soon as he does, the Omnitrix comes to life, with Ben transforming into forearms to fight the oncoming horde of robo-sumos. However, in doing so, he also draws the ire of another fighter, Ishiyama, the game's hero, who mistakes Ben for his nemesis Kenko the Shapeshifter. Thankfully, Ben's encyclopedic knowledge of sumo slammers saves him here, with the young brunette managing to convince Ishiyama that he is a friend, though Kevin does have to elbow him in the ribs to make him shut up when he almost lets slip that Ishiyama and his entire world only exist inside a video game. Nonetheless, Ishiyama does agree to help guide the boys to the final level, even showing them a shortcut, which Kevin is happy to make use of. Eventually, the trio enter the fabled Chamber of the Kappa, which Ishiyama informs them will grant them access to any level, so long as they can solve its riddle, though before they get a chance, they are confronted by Kenko himself, who demands Ben explain the Omnitrix tokens that have suddenly appeared, threatening to crush Kevin and Ishiyama in his dragon form if the boy does not comply. Vehemently, Ishiyama demands Ben say nothing, though having a hunch about Kenko's draconic body, Kevin presses his hand against the scaly part of the shapeshifter that is binding him, with it proving to be an absorbable substance. As a result, Kevin quickly finds himself coated in blue dragon scales, with the legendary hardness giving him enough of a boost to punch Kenko in the side, forcing him to release himself and Ishiyama. This also frees up Ben to attack the villain with them, and seeing that he is outmatched, Kenko flees, with Ishiyama gratefully thanking his two companions, while dubbing Kevin the Dragon Warrior, a title Ben can't help but be a little jealous of, even if he does get the consolation prize of coming across the Gax icon and re-unlocking him. Now at last, the heroes are able to hear the Kappa's riddle, though the absence of Gwen proves to be something of a roadblock, as none of them have an immediate clue as to what the answer might be, especially since they did not collect the bow earlier. However, this is not to sell short Kevin's own intelligence, as being a crafty guy, he's able to work out the pieces of the puzzle and how they fit together much like parts in a machine. It just takes a bit longer than it would have if Gwen had been present. All the same, both Ben and Ishiyama are impressed, though their congratulations will have to wait, as the final dojo begins rising into the air, and they'll have to leap to catch it. Riding the dojo all the way to outer space, the trio arrive at the arena of sumo warriors, where unfortunately Kenko is waiting for them, having learned from their last encounter not to underestimate Ishiyama's strange companions. As a result, he enters his true form, which proves far more of a challenge for the heroes, with Kevin wisely telling Ben to go find the upgrade icon so they can go home, and to leave Kenko to him. Worriedly, Ben reminds his best friend that he's only got one life left, so if he dies to Kenko, he's gone forever. Though flashing a roguish grin, the young ruffian replies that in that case, he just won't die, an unspoken request to trust him in his eyes. Nodding to show that he does trust Kevin, Ben then breaks off to begin his search, leaving Ishiyama and Kevin to deal with the shapeshifter. Thankfully, by being allowed to focus on finding the upgrade icon, Ben is able to uncover it before too long, though not before Ishiyama is tragically slain, trying to keep Kenko from touching the icon. From the ring, Kevin urges Ben to make Kenko pay for that, and using Upgrade's newly reacquired powers, Ben does so, melding with the reality of the game and rewriting Kenko's code to take away all his powers. In an instant, the almighty shapeshifter is reduced to a little wizened old man, who Kevin takes great pleasure in shoving inside a chest and flinging into the abyss, where he can never bother anyone again. The two friends then fist bump, declaring that it's high time they go home, though before they depart, Ben has one last order of business to attend to, reviving Ishiyama with his upgrade powers and bidding him goodbye. Smiling proudly, Ishiyama calls Ben a true hero for this, causing the boy to beam, before he transports himself and Kevin back to the real world, just as the Omnitrix begins to time out. Following this little adventure, things begin to return to normal for Ben and Kevin, with Max expressing pleasure that the two boys are on good terms again. To celebrate, he takes the kids to Planetary Studios, where Ben is eager to meet his childhood hero, Kangaroo Commando. Unfortunately, what should have been a fun day at a theme park is ruined by sabotage and feuding, with it falling to Ben, Gwen, and Kevin to stop Kangaroo Commando's insane twin brother. In this endeavor, nothing of substance changes from canon, with the same being true for the next few episodes, those being Under Wraps, Monster Weather, and The Unnaturals. The only change worth mentioning is that during the final confrontation with the mummy in Under Wraps, Max only has 2 hazmat suits, causing Kevin to instead coat himself in concrete, with this being revealed as a way to avoid corrodium corruption. Finally, things do begin to change again when Team Tennyson arrive in St. Louis, as when they encounter Xylene, she is fascinated to learn they have an Osmosian in their midst, and even more intrigued when she hears his surname, having been a plumber ally for many years, and even heard of Devon through his connection to Max. This immediately endears Xylene to Kevin, though this fondness doesn't last when he along with Ben quickly surmise that she intends to take Max away. Having already lost his father, the idea of losing his new father figure is utterly unacceptable to Kevin, with him joining forces with Ben to spy on Xylene and sabotage matters however he can. However, it seems they have bigger fish to fry, as that evening they are attacked by a powerful Vilgax robot, which Xylene reveals must have been frozen along with her when her ship crashed. Angrily, Ben and Kevin call this all her fault, though when Max sacrifices himself and is taken, they are forced to put their grudges aside and work together. Luckily, Xylene has more than just plumber knowledge, revealing herself to be the keeper of several Omnitrix codes, one of which she uses to bestow Ben with a gourmand transformation, which she promptly dubs Upchuck. With the eating abilities of Upchuck, alongside Xylene's telepathy, Gwen's lucky girl powers, and Kevin's Osmosian absorption, the gang are quickly able to dispatch the robot and free Max, though it does sadden Kevin that there isn't any of the machine left for him to loot, as he would have liked to tinker with it, or maybe just sell it, since some old habits die hard. When everyone is reunited, Xylene makes one last entreaty for Max to join her in the stars, though shaking his head, Max refuses, stating that these kids are his whole universe, a claim which makes Kevin blush, even if he doesn't refuse the hug the old man pulls him, Ben, and Gwen into. Next up is The Return, which begins like in canon, albeit with one key difference. Thanks to having had Kevin as a battle partner for most of his tenure as a hero, Ben has a higher view of the team as his allies rather than his cleanup crew, meaning he is less arrogant and inclined to do everything himself. This means the team is in a less fractious state when they visit the Kennedy Space Center to investigate the Purple Lightning. Likewise, when Ben decides to search for clues the old-fashioned way while Gwen and Grandpa Max are monitoring surveillance footage, he invites Kevin to join him, with this being a wise decision, as the boys are promptly ambushed by the Yenal Dushi, who somehow escaped from its subterranean prison. Nonetheless, now is hardly the time for speculating about the wolf's reappearance, with Ben and Kevin having to fight for their lives against a foe who is very clearly out for blood. Hoping to beat this monster the same way as last time, Ben attempts to transform into Gax, though to his dismay, instead mistransforms into his new mummy state, needing to learn how to use it on the fly, while Kevin desperately tries not to become Wolfie's chew toy. Thankfully, with the Yenal Dushi having to handle 2 foes rather than 1, it cannot gain a decisive lead, with Ben and Kevin's honed teamwork even allowing them to briefly tie the werewolf up. That is until Max and Gwen burst in, at which point Gwen mistakes Ben for the mummy they met before, and blasts him with a spell from Charmcaster's book, thus allowing the real monster to escape. Transforming back into Ben, the boy lambasts his cousin for this, though playing peacemaker, Max breaks things up before they can escalate, instead suggesting they follow the werewolf before it gets too far away. Taking this advice, Team Tennyson make their way into an aeroplane graveyard, where both the real mummy and werewolf are meeting with Dr. Victor from the Space Center. Seeing they have been found out, the trio of villains go on the attack, and though the heroes attempt to hold them off, they are no match for Dr. Victor, who is transformed into something resembling Frankenstein's monster, as he unleashes purple lightning upon them. Using another spell, Gwen is able to protect herself and her family from the worst of the blast, though the same cannot be said for an old rocket capsule directly behind them, which takes the attack in their stead and topples over, burying Kevin and the Tennysons. Briefly, Victor as the Yenal Dushi search the wreckage for signs of life, though when it finds none, he orders it and the mummy to follow him, as they have to prepare for the upcoming rocket launch. Crawling their way out of the wreckage a few moments later, Ben and the others agree that if this trio of Halloween rejects wants to interfere with the launch, then they have to stop them, with it being decided that Max and Gwen will try to stop the launch, or Ben and Kevin tell Victor and his allies. In a testament to the gravity of the situation, Ben doesn't even mock Gwen as they split up, instead telling her and Max to be safe, while they in turn share that sentiment for him and Kevin. Following the not-so-good doctor back the way he came, Ben and Kevin soon discover discover that he has built himself a strange command center inside a defunct rocket. Watching from out of sight, the boys witness as Victor uses the power of this place to teleport the Eneldushi across the country in an instant. Now, this is a blessing, as with the Omnitrix back in the green, the pair figure now is the best time to jump the monstrous scientist since he's all alone. Coating himself in metal for this fight, Kevin moves first, running at Victor from one side, while Ben transforms into Accelerate and approaches him at high speed from the other. However, even combined, they're little more than gnats to Victor, who swats them both away in a single motion before blasting at them with more purple lightning. Due to being a speedster, Ben is able to avoid the blasts hurled at him, though Kevin is not so lucky, with the lightning seemingly being drawn to him and causing him even more pain than usual when he is struck by it. Seeing this, Ben rushes to help his friend, though this is just what Victor wants, as with the little nuisances distracted, he is free at last to revive his master. Worriedly, Ben and Kevin ask who that is, though they do not have to wait for long, as from the very floor itself, a horribly familiar form begins taking shape, that of Ghostfreak. Unfortunately, this is not the worst of it, as at that moment the Omnitrix times out, meaning Ben cannot even zip away with Kevin on his back, with the boys instead being forced to split up. Thanks to his metal coating, Kevin cannot be possessed, though the same cannot be said of Ben, who must jump, roll, and hide in order to avoid the sinister spectre who pursues him. Meanwhile, Victor has his eyes set squarely on Kevin, having concocted a most evil plan to ensure his master gets what he wants. To this end, he chases down the boy, and upon grabbing hold of him, lets loose a bevy of purple lightning that makes Kevin scream and writhe. Understanding his subordinate's scheme, Ghostfreak then hisses that it seems Kevin's metal coating has made him extra vulnerable to Victor's electrokinesis, so unless Ben wishes to see his friend die, he should surrender himself at once and become his new vessel. In spite of the pain, Kevin manages to choke out a rebuttal, urging Ben to forget about him and run, though this is simply not within the boy's nature, with him instead stepping into view, his hand over the Omnitrix dial, as he states that if he's gonna do this, he wants Ghostfreak's word that he won't use his boy to hurt Gwen, Kevin, or Grandpa Max. Cackling maniacally, Ghostfreak promises that he will uphold Ben's conditions, gesturing for Victor to stop torturing Kevin, who at this point is barely conscious. Recognizing this, Ben takes his hand away from the dial, telling Ghostfreak to go on and do it then, an order the Ectoneurite does not need to hear twice, as with another raspy exclamation of glee, he flies into the boy's chest and vanishes. From the ground where he lays smoldering, Kevin watches on, silently urging his best friend to fight Ghostfreak's possession, to be alright, and for a moment, it seems he is, as a smile curls Ben's face, one that Kevin has seen many times before. But then, all hope dies when Ben opens his eyes, as they are not the greens that Kevin has come to know, but instead the deep malefic pink of Ghostfreak. And that's where we'll end things for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts, suggestions, or screams of rage in the comments below.